Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar, Navigating NIS2 Compliance for IAM Systems. My name is Carmen Fröstl. I'm Marketing Manager at IC Consult, and I'm very excited that so many of you joined us today for our session. Before we get started, a few housekeeping rules. Every one of you is muted during the whole webinar. We will record this session, so of course everyone will receive the recording afterwards. And at the end, we will also have a Q&A session. So if during the webinar any questions come up, just drop them into our questions panel. And we're happy to answer all of them at the end of this webinar. Our two presenters today are Nicola Denitis and Sasha Ilic. And with that, I wish everyone a very interesting session. And I'd like to hand over to Nicola to get started.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Welcome also from my side. It's a pleasure alengside my colleague Sasha Ilic to introduce you to NIS2. And Sasha Ilic is will show you a deeper insight into NIS2 after I introduce you into NIS2, what's about, what are we talking about, who's going to be affected, when is it coming, and what should be prepared for. And at the end, as Carmen already mentioned, we will have time for a short Q&A. Feel free to write down any questions you have, make notes, and then we will have time to answer this. So what's NIS2? NIS stands for Network and Information Security, and it's in fact not completely new, because the European Union already enacted the first legislation in 2016. So let's call it NIS1, NIS version 1. The goal was to enhance cybersecurity cooperation among the European Union member states. But now we are faced with NIS2 to aim the same goal, but this time in a stricter way. Why that? So NIS2 is the successor of NIS to set minimum cybersecurity standards in Europe, because the first one was not that strict, not that sufficient or successful. So the first version of NIS was not that strict like they wanted to have it now with NIS2. So there were many vague terms in the regulation and the directive of NIS1, and this led to the strange situation that let's say every single European member state understood, because they wanted to understand it differently. So so the implementation led to different kind of variations, so that we had in the end not one goal as mentioned before, but 27 maybe. So that's why we have now a new version, and talking about the timeline and looking at Germany. Germany has a deadline, so an appointment next year, end of next year. So in October 24, the NIS2 Implementation Act has to be aligned. So, and that being said, we need to know, okay, there's something coming, but who is going to be affected of this NIS2 regulation? So the new one. So, and it's interesting that the European Union don't call it companies, but entities. So, and it's quite basic quite generic term what they are providing, like who are affected entities, those providing essential or important services. Okay, we have done a closer looking at the scope of the inclusion, and then we can see it's we're not talking only about companies, but also their suppliers. And they have a split into two entity classifications. One is critical entities named, and the other one highly critical entities. What does that mean? It means that if you look at the left side, that was the former list of the affected areas. So NIS1 version, let's call it, and this has been extended. So not only the not that strict regulation of NIS1 was the reason to get now NIS2, but also this extension of the added industry you can see on the right side. And we have also another distinct classification, like if you look at the blue colored areas, these are the so-called critical entities, and the green ones are the highly critical entities. We didn't want to choose red here in this case, because we know something is coming, so we don't need more drama. So, but the green ones are the highly critical entities. But now we know who is gonna be affected, but who exactly? So when? And there's a simple size cap rule, and this is saying starting by 50 employees and more than 10 million euros annual turnover. These are the two criteria where you know, okay, we are going to be affected of NIS2 or not. But what do we do just in case? So in case that there is a security case. So in case of an incident, an affected entity needs to report to the appropriate authority within 24 hours, so immediately, and within 72 hours, there is also to forward an incident analysis to the Federal Office for Information Security, in Germany called BSI. And afterwards, so within a month, a detailed report has also to be submitted. And taking a closer look to the at the NIS2 directive, we see here main pillars. So these are the main components of the NIS2 directive, and it's saying risk analysis is and information system security, for instance, is to identify and evaluate weak points and vulnerabilities. Incident handling is meant preventing, detecting, and how to respond on incidents like we have seen before. Business continuity and crisis management, both are crucial. So in case of a security incident, you need to ensure your business continuity, and you need to have a crisis management strategy in place. So, and the main task looking at this bullet point is looking at the future when NIS2 will be then in our world, is to adapt your crisis management strategy on the new requirements. And supply chain security is about safeness, but also suppliers act NIS2 compliant. As we have seen at the beginning, it's not only about the company, but also about the suppliers, which has to take care of the new upcoming regulations. Security in network and information systems is about life cycle of the network and information system. So it's about to define security requirements for the procurement, development, and maintenance phase of the network information systems, as well as an iterative risk analysis and continuous documentation. Looking at policies, for instance, you're gonna need a guideline for password complexity or password changes, or another guideline about access control and authorization. Looking at procedures, for instance, you're gonna need a procedure for how to report security incidents or how to perform security checks. The use of cryptography and encryption is also kind of mandatory, so data encryption is for sure, and a secure communication has to be established or be aware of. Zero trust approach is by name exactly what it's saying: zero trust to every single user as well as every single IT asset. And this can be improved with a multi-factor authentication. And the last one, cyber hygiene, is kind of a daily duty. So these are the tiny things, the details in your cyber security approach, which you need also to take care, like password security, software updates, safe data exchange, but also enabling your employees through education and training. So that being said, I would like to hand over now to my teammate, Sasha. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicola. So welcome from my side as well. My name is Sasha, and I'm part of the IC Consult for 4 years now. I'm happy to have you all here together talking about the NIS2 Directive. So just to have a short recap about what Nicola said, he told you about the NIS2 requirements. Those are that you can see in this slide here as well, just with some other colors, but I will go into that in a few seconds. So basically, those components that you can see here, those were listed in a huge document of the NIS2, which is released from the European Union. It's now up to the member states of the European Union to actually release or pass a law until next year, October. And so just to keep in mind, all that you can read now in this huge document of the European Union, there are just recommendations for the member states what to consider. But there is no actual action items, so to say, what companies need actually to do now. So this is something is still up to the member states what they're going to choose for, and they will most probably orient themselves for already existing laws. For example, in Germany, it's the CRITIS or BaFin or VAIT and so on. So based on that, we already know or kind of have a feeling about what is going to come in detail with the NIS2 directive once it's released from the member state of each European Union member. So talking about the NIS2 components, so this is actually the content, which is everything is about. I want to point out the the specific touch point to an identity and access management solution. So I guess if you were on our website registering for this webinar, I hope that you already know what an identity and access management solution or system, so to say, is. So I don't need to explain it anymore, but I just want to point out those components that we see in the NIS2 and how they are directly affected within an IAM strategy. So those components that you can see marked as green here, those are mostly covered within a good IAM solution. The other ones in blue, I just wanted to go go through it quickly. But something like risk analysis and information system security, this is something that only an identity and access management system will not fulfill this requirement. So you need to evaluate your risk management processes and frameworks. If you have some kind of risk management group or department or specific resources in your organization who are handling risks and evaluating risks all the time, and more specific for cyber security. Then the next blue topic I wanted to point out is the business continuity and crisis management, which is kind of partly covered with a good IAM solution, but yeah, an IAM solution cannot recover all of your affected systems if they're hacked, but this is about having like backup servers somewhere and have a run book for if there is really a huge incident in a crisis, so that you have an exact run book to run when a critical incident is coming up. So therefore, on the right side, you can also see the action items that you can maybe take away with you, but the focus will be obviously on the touch points between those components in an identity and access management system. To go shortly over the blue points again, supply chain security. This is something that you just have to make sure that with your suppliers, you're acting on a base that your suppliers are also certified in some way. Let's say there's a standard like ISO 27001, so you can choose your suppliers and see who you want to interact with. This is something that was pointed out in the NIS2 document as well, but this is not really affecting an IAM solution. Talking about security, network, and information systems, specifically about acquisition, development, and maintenance, this is partly covered. So if you're choosing a vendor, let's say, for your identity and access management, this is falling under this point of acquisition, and also development and maintenance if you have a team implementing or maintaining your identity and access management system. This is also where you have a touch point, obviously. So with that being said, let's jump to the green points, which are kind of, yeah, have bigger touch points to identity and access management. And starting with incident handling, for detection and response, there are systems and tools who are probably better than an identity and access management tool, because there are standardized tools for that. For example, ServiceNow as a IAM tool, Security Information and Event Management System, where you can tracking your incidents, you can create incidents, you can categorize them, you can have escalation steps until top management in order to escalate an incident, and yeah, trigger your processes for reporting to authorities, for example. So this is where you need a CM system and not an IAM system. But talking about prevention, this is something that a good IAM solution will help you a lot. Why? Because if you're with a good identity and access management solution, you're trying to keep up the data quality, which is one thing, but also securing all of your endpoints and your resources or IT assets in a more specific way. This is also something I want to talk about later, talking about privileged accesses, for example. This is something where you can, of course, prevent an amount of incidents. The next point, policies and procedures. This is probably the most important thing to have in an identity and access management tool. Talking about cross or organization-wide or cross application policies that are affected through the whole organization. You need to have policies within your organization, and which can be created and maintained on a top level of your organization. And having policies is one thing, but the more important thing is enforcing them policies, because you can create policies and say, okay, this is within my organization, this is a rule, this is a rule, this is a rule, but to really make sure and enforce the relevant systems and resources and employees to keep up with that policies, this is the tricky part. And therefore, with a good IAM solution, we will have most probably the best way in enforcing policies. Next point, use of cryptography and encryption. Yeah, this is a huge touch point to IAM, because when you want to exchange data, this will, or sensitive data, this will be on a base of cryptography and encryption. This is the best practice nowadays, and you should definitely consider that, but this is what comes with a good IAM solution in the part of access management specifically. The last 2 points are also pretty much important. A zero trust approach. So zero trust means that no system basically trusts another system within your organization. So every access to an endpoint or to an asset needs to be authenticated. And this is all about zero trust. So no system or no endpoint or whatever is trusting another one. Everything is going through an authentication process whenever and wherever in your organization, and having additionally a multi-factor authentication in place, such as authenticating to with another step via an authenticator app, for example, or as a second factor with your SMS, for example. But the authentication app is the more modern way nowadays, is something that is highly recommended and is also playing its huge part with a good privileged access management strategy. And to finish this list here is cyber hygiene, and this is something that Nicola already mentioned. At the end, you want to have an evidence that you trained your employees, for example. So every topic that you see here, and once the NIS2 law is released, they could possibly audit you within the processes. And if you, for example, train your employees for your workspace security, you can use, for example, a third-party service to do so, and then your employee will get a certificate that he took that training and he is now trained for workspace security. And you can store that basically, and whenever an audit comes and say, okay, now we want to see if you have trained your employees because this is a part of NIS2, then you have the evidence. This is basically the list. So to summarize that, I just wanted to point out that a good IAM solution will not fix all of the problems, obviously, because NIS2 is much more complex than only having a good identity and access management solution. But having a good and clean identity and access management solution will fix at least, yeah, the most requirements that you can see here. So going to the next slide. I hope I can do so. I should do. Yeah. That's one too far. There we go. Just to give you a quick overview on what identity and access management is actually about, this is a capability map that you can see with all sub capabilities of identity and access management. So, and I marked the green ones as NIS2 relevant, and the blue ones as more or less, yeah, let's say less relevant for NIS2. Talking about API management and customer identity and access management specifically, those are not really in scope when you want to evaluate your IAM strategy and to fulfill the NIS2 requirements. Because, for example, if you have customer applications, usually, and I hope so, you should not, or those access to those customer applications should not cause any huge incident where you're risking losing some data or accesses, or have privileged access to some resources and then through everything around. So this is something that might not be considered here. Talking about the other topics, those are quite important, and I also marked some of the sub capabilities, such as management of policies, standards and controls, or especially I already talked about the policy enforcement. So those are texts that I marked as well as important for NIS2. Going through that, I wanted to point out a few things. One is the IAM governance, which is now taking a huge part in especially for banks and insurance companies, and we had a lot of customers in that area, and they needed to adapt some processes before the NIS2 came out because they have other authorities auditing them. So, but this is basically something that I can rely on. Talking about IAM governance, this is something where you can also have this policy enforcement. You have recertification process, so to make sure that only the employees have, it's the so-called least access principle, where your employees only have the access or the permission to do to access to resource what they need on a daily basis. And with a recertification, for example, you can then go like scheduled every 3 or 6 months, check if all of your employees are still having the amount of permissions they actually should have. And also a huge part of IAM governance is the part of report and audit. So a lot of vendors have the feature to track and monitor and give you a good opportunity for report and auditing. So this is something, if you don't have a good IAM governance in place now, and later on you have an audit because of NIS2, this is definitely a feature you should have, because it's easy to it's then easier have a centralized solution with all of your reports and see where have access to what and when access was given, etc. One other capability, this is so-called intelligence, is something that I wanted to point out as well, because in some vendor products you also have the feature of threat detection, and based on artificial intelligence nowadays as well. So this is something that will also helping you fulfill the requirements of NIS2, because detecting threats immediately is it's really important in order to react and behave in a proper way. Last but not least, talking about maybe the most important capability here is privileged access management. And to just summarize why NIS2 is actually there, in 1 or 2 sentences, NIS2 is trying to avoid any like crises when something has happened. so that people can still access to electricity, can still access to having food and stuff like that. So nowadays, with those kind of wars that we have, it has to make organizations have to make sure that at least their privileged accesses are secured in a really effective way, because once you have a privileged account or an admin account hacked, you can probably do damage that will have also an impact on society, for example. So this is NIS. Is NIS2 trying to avoid, and therefore we have to have a look onto privileged accesses specifically. And therefore I wanted to talk the last couple of minutes about privileged access management for those who did never hear about it. So privileged access management is a capability of identity and access management. It is in the same world of identity and access management, but there are, for example, vendors and products which want to have the privileged accounts managed differently or separately. So I already talked about that humans are or might be the weakest link. So the PAM's resolution here is to separate the humans and the credentials, so that you cannot have your personal identity and all of your accounts in your organization and then just assigning a role to your personal account so you can do administrative work. This is not the idea. So you want to separate all of the privileged accesses from personal identities and put them into some kind of shared accounts, and then secure those shared accounts in a more specific way, which I will show you now. Exactly, just to go through this slide, a privilege are everywhere. So the PAM's resolution is to have a privileged endpoint management, for example. This is something that a specific PAM or privileged access management provider or vendor will provide you out of the box. For compliance and the risk for compliance and audit failures, you have session management, where you can control sessions, you can kill sessions, but you can also monitor and record them within a good PAM solution. Cyber attackers target endpoints and workstations is, for example, a risk. But introducing PAM governance will make sure that you just enforce your privileged IT assets to be called from the PAM server. This is something that you can configure on, like if you have critical IT assets within your organization, you can just secure them in a way that only through a PAM server you can access to this specific IT asset. So this is PAM governance is about. Having a maybe more detailed look into PAM, I already explained that that you want to separate your personal identity and that you have not directly assigned an administrative role, but you can have a connection between your personal account, and then you can try to access at least to a privileged account. So if you have a separated privileged account who is allowed then to do things on your more secured IT asset, you now need to log into that privileged account first. So you as a human, you are logging into a front end, and only the front end is talking to the backend, and the backend will provide you a session, and there is also the password stored, and then you can access the critical IT asset. And after that, you can also configure, okay, if you can configure the things about the session. So how long will the session be valid? Is there maybe a checkout workflow or check-in workflow, for example, where you say, okay, my work now is done, I can leave it now like that. And after you use, and you can also configure that you have scheduled password rotation, or after each use you can rotate the password, so you can make sure that it stays secure. And going to the next slide, I want to talk about the monitoring as well. So one thing I forgot exactly is the multi-factor authentication, because how you want to log in to the privileged account, not only via password, but in a more specific way with a multi-factor authentication. So this allows you to enter like the privileged account, and then from there you can access to the more secure IT asset from there, and only the PAM server can do so. Talking about recordings and log, as I already mentioned, you have the opportunity to monitor and to also record the things that your administrator, so to say, or an employee can actually do. And this goes along with a works council. In German, it's Betriebsrat. So if you want to monitor or to record sessions, you might need to check that with the Works Council as well, just to mention it here. I already talked about check-in and check-out workflows, for example. If you're done with your work, that you have maybe a specific checkout workflow, and real-time monitoring is also something that I had explained. Something additionally, because this is more than NIS2, even more NIS2 relevant, is that you can also have a detection of malicious activities and a threat detection and response. So in a PAM, you can like monitor behavior of your user and see if there's suspicious activity, for example. And you can have a good integration or automated integration via connector, so to say, to an CM or SOC system. So CM is the security, it's security information and event management system. And yeah, you will probably have to need to have an integration there as well. So once you have detected an incident, then you can yeah, create an incident immediately into SIAM and escalate that maybe to the highest stage then. That being said, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I just want to summarize every topic now. So first of all, what comes with NIS2 is that your top management is liable. Cybersecurity now becomes a management issue. So if there is something not NIS2 compliant, your manager in your organization is liable now for that, which is yeah, a huge takeaway for you to consider that. Then, as I already mentioned, enforcement is key. So not only defining processes and policies and etc., but enforcing them across all over your organization. And the most secure way to enforce things is to automate them and to reduce any manual activities, basically. And therefore, identity and access management and privileged access management specifically are key, because identity and access management is there for enforcement and enforcing all of your processes, and privileged access management will take care of any critical IT asset within your organization. With that being said, I just want to point out just one slide that we as IC Consult, we did some of or a lot of assessments before, and just to let you know, if you want to reach out to us afterwards, this is a basic approach where we go through our customers when they need for any like help in advisory, that this is how we approach helping our customers first. I don't want to go in detail about this slide. I think you will get the slides anyway afterwards. So let's have at least 5 minutes time then for questions, I would say.
Thank you, Sasha. So at the moment, there are not any questions in the chat. So I encourage you, if there's anything burning in your mind that you want to ask us, use the opportunity now. We will give you a few minutes, and yeah, we're looking forward to your questions. Okay. In case we close the webinar now and you have a question afterwards, of course, we're not out of this world. Just drop us a message and we're happy to continue the discussion with you afterwards as well. Oh, there we go. First question we have, what does SOC stand for?
Yeah, it's Security Operations Center. So this is, let's say, workforce or a team which are carrying any security incidents. So an operations team, let's say, for security issues.
Thanks so far. Seems we are not ready, but on the right track. That's good. Thank you, messages. Is it necessary to record the PAM session or only when a user access to a system with privilege rights?
Yeah, exactly. In that case, if he access, you have to define that because it really depends on the criticality of the IT asset. There is no requirement yet in NIS2 saying, okay, you need to record the session now. There is even not saying that you need to have a PAM solution, but it's highly recommended and best practice, and to at least have the most critical IT assets secured for administrators who are operating in that system.
Another question. Is NIS2 active in October 2024 or will there be a transition phase?
We don't know yet. For now, we just know that the member states of the European Union have to react and have to pass a law until October. And Germany, the law is now in the German Council or Bundestag, let's say, where they're deciding about this law, and this will most probably be active within October 24, with no phase in between for preparation. But this is something that the members are defining. But NIS2, like the European Union, defined that at least a law had to be passed at latest October 24.
Yeah, it seems that it's important to follow the news, I would say, till next year, because things are ongoing and they could change, like Sasha already mentioned. They could change some criteria, and something is not that public, but we know, for instance, that the European Union is going to review and maybe redesign NIS2 in 2029. So there's a, let's say, a kind of a plan, but it's good to have a look into news and stay close to the NIS2 info streamline.
Okay, next question. In the IAM capability map, there is the point 9, intelligence threats detection. How do you do that in practice?
It really depends on what the vendor can offer you. But in practice, if you have a vendor with the feature of detection, of threat detection, then this is something that you can use out of the box. You have to integrate your processes and systems, and then you can configure that rule for detection. And yeah, and most probably this is something which comes with a privileged access management tool specifically. So it's dependent on the vendor how that could look.
Okay, next question. What might be the consequences if you are not 100% compliant?
That's actually hard to answer because we are at the end, we're not the auditors, and for now the NIS2 directive, which was released from the European Union, is something that you cannot audit anyway, because this is just a let's say action item, or a document for the member states of the European Union. So once the law is released from each European Union member state, there will be specific points which you can measure, and then the audit can decide if you went through or if you passed the audit or not. And in a usual way, if the audit finds some things, they will not directly charge you, but it depends on the criticality, of course, but you will have some time to fix those issues. This is in the past within other laws how the audit procedure is processing, basically.
And then we have another question. If the PAM solution is in the cloud, how can one tell what credentials are saved in front and what credentials are stored in the back end? How can this be separated in the cloud solution?
I think therefore we should reach out to a privileged access management expert from a cloud solution. If you like, you can reach out to either me or to Nico afterwards, and we can organize maybe a quick meeting with one of our architects, especially because yeah, I think we need to have a deeper look into that.
Okay, there are no further questions so far. We'll give you another minute and then close the webinar. Okay. Well, then I like to say thank you, first off, to our presenters today for your time, your preparation, and your expertise you shared. And of course, everyone who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this session. And in case you need anything, just reach out to us. And with that, I wish you everyone a wonderful rest of the week, and goodbye. See you next time.
Thanks, Carmen.
Thank
Thanks,
you.